Hi, this is Sarah Root, and this is my supervision and evaluation of school personnel case study for EDL 851. So this case study is about a teacher reacting negatively to a personnel evaluation. And I am the principal, and there's a deadline for teacher evaluations coming up. And so far, the majority of my new teachers have been performing quite well this year, with one exception, and that is Mrs. Stevens. And I have visited her class several times, and the students seem to be very distracted, not as much involved in their learning, disinterested in the classroom proceedings. They're barely answering when the teacher calls on them. So when I hired her, she had wonderful recommendations in terms of her knowledge and her background, but she seems to have a lot of problems with classroom management and motivating her students in her curriculum and in her class. So I do notice that when I pass by her room or when I approach her room to go in, there's a lot of noise I can hear on the inside. Seems like students are moving around. Now it's hard to know, it seems like there's a lot of movement. It's hard to know if that's connected with the class, however, with the curriculum, but when I walk into the room, everything kind of settles down. So I do believe that it's not connected to the curriculum, it's just that they are active. And the students are showing very little respect for Mrs. Stevens. So during the most recent observation, I asked to meet with her afterwards during a post-observation conference, and she was incredibly irritable. When I offered suggestions, she was very hostile, unwilling to make changes. She was very difficult to communicate with. So I tried some suggestions in trying to get her to involve her students more, and she reacted very defensively and was not really interested in my feedback. So, and when she responded, she also said that that there hadn't been conclusive research about student involvement equaling classroom achievement. And I found it very discouraging, in fact, the conversation. And really we ended the meeting and there really hadn't been any progress made. And she definitely had not been willing to accept feedback or be accepting of her part in some of the inadequacy in her teaching. So I was trying to decide what to do. I have this evaluation. So I decided to visit her class again, but same things were happening. There was no difference. She was standing in the front of the room and lecturing, and the students weren't participating really in her lecture other than some rote recitation of information. Honestly, I couldn't find any real feedback that was positive, so I ended up just leaving and not providing any additional information or feedback for her. And I did decide after that visit that I needed to recommend her for non-renewal. And this part of that being that she was up for tenure. So if I keep Mrs. Stevens, she will get tenure. Otherwise, she's been probationary. So if she gets tenure, she will be at our school and essentially will have her forever until she decides to move on. I decided to recommend that her contract not be renewed because she hadn't been receptive to feedback and she had had great difficulty motivating her students, and there was some significant problems that I was seeing, and the fact that she wasn't willing to accept that she needed to make some changes. So I went ahead and filled out that form, and I asked her to come join me after school. And when she came in, I tried to put her at ease, try to kind of build some of that relationship back in. I mean, doing something just to kind of ease the tension in the room, and she kind of she was not having it. And so I gave her the evaluation, and when she looked it over, she threw it back on my desk. She said it wasn't fair, that that she was a much better teacher than the evaluation indicated, and that I made her nervous when I was in the back of the room, and it made her react negatively and her students react negatively. And she felt that I didn't provide any practical ideas for her to use. And she ended it saying that she was going to fight this, and she would even take this to court because she didn't think it was fair, because she didn't receive any feedback or support from a supervisor or myself. So that is where we left off. So legal issues with this scenario, with this situation. So first, the thing with probationary teacher contracts is, at least in my experience, is that they can be a teacher that is on a probationary contract can be non-renewed at any moment, at any time. They, in fact, most places are without any reason. If a teacher is probationary, they can be non-renewed. So no laws have been broken. Of course, she has the right to fight it in court if she would prefer to do that. However, based on how teacher contracts works, I don't think that she'll have a case to stand on. Ethical issues. Honestly, the students are not receiving the best education. Mrs. Stevens has really low expectations of them, and I think that there's some ethical issues with that, and that unwillingness to accept feedback, unwillingness to even recognize that. The other part of that is myself as the principal. Did I do everything to ensure success? Well, I think I did some things, but I could have done some things a lot better. And so as I assess myself and my own ethical behavior, there were some things I could have done, like having that conversation after the last time I observed her class. I should have just continued with that conversation, even though I had already made the decision to non-renew her. I think that that conversation was also important for her to know that, hey, this is not looking good. Again, multiple conversations about that. So here's our synthesis of what happened. So after multiple classroom observations and an unsuccessful post-observation conference, a principal, myself, decides to non-renew the contract of a probationary teacher, but she does not believe she has received adequate support. So here are the facts. So in terms of the people in this case, it's pretty limited. We know that there's myself, the principal, Mrs. Stevens, the teacher. She has students. There's a supervisor she mentions that she doesn't feel has supported her. And there's also a superintendent, because I send the non-renewal to the superintendent's office. Unknown is gender, race, customs, really anything else about the people in this scenario. Place, I know it's at a school, because that is where teachers and students, that's where teachers work and students go to get education. However, nothing else is known. Physical condition, demographics, rural, suburban, urban, location, none of it. So that's all I know. It's at school. There's a classroom. Program-wise, I do know that teacher observations are done by the principal. There are multiple new teachers this year, including Mrs. Stevens. There is a teacher evaluation form. It is very basic. Probably needs to be updated, but that's just the program that does exist. What I don't know is the curriculum, grade level, type of program, private versus public. This scenario could really be in any one of those situations. It's pretty general. So review and prioritize. So ultimately, my goals are to promote the success and well-being of staff and students as the administrator, and also to promote school improvement. So that is my goal, and then also to provide probationary teachers with support, and that's part of that, ensuring the success and well-being of staff. So in this situation, those are my goals. In terms of my needs, based on the situation and everything that has happened, I need to examine available resources. increase student capacity for effective teaching practices, and there needs to be an updated system to evaluate teachers. So that's kind of where I'm looking going forward. So based on all that information, I've come up with some options and consequences. I think I have enough information to really make a decision and to proceed here. So the first option is to take no action, and the consequences of that is keeping missed students means students lose. She has low expectations and has been unwilling to accept feedback. So taking no action, any further action, and just letting her stay on means that they lose out. And I may never be able to get rid of her. Just kidding. The number two, second option is to follow through with non-renewal. So following through with that decision that I'd already made, and the consequences of that is that there's an opportunity to hire someone who's a better fit. Option three is to keep Mrs. Stevens and provide some support, especially through especially through like putting her on intensive evaluation and keeping her probationary and providing some support. So, however, this may not change her ability to teach. We don't know. And then the fourth option is to offer resignation instead of non-renewal. Mrs. Stevens has a better opportunity to find a teaching job elsewhere if I offer her the opportunity to resign instead of putting non-renewal on her record. So I'm going to evaluate my options. So option number one, which was take no action, meaning to not follow through with the non-renewal and just let it sit on my desk. The pros of that is it gives her another chance, and there's growth opportunity for me as I work through that situation. Cons are the damage may be unrepairable with Mrs. Stevens. It impacts student growth because she's not been effective, and it lacks follow through on my part, and that may be it may cause some additional damage with other teachers because they really need me to follow through and use my expertise and knowledge. Option two is the non-renewal, to follow through with what I was planning. So the pros are that that we're going to let a weak teacher go. And it also impacts student growth, and this time in a positive way, that hopefully we'll be able to, the plan is to bring in someone who would be more effective with our students. The negative is there could be a possible lawsuit, I suppose, could possibly go to court, and also not providing opportunity for change, not providing her an opportunity to change. Option three is to renew her and support her. Some of the pros of that are I don't have to hire. It avoids any sort of lawsuits or any sort of issues that she wants to bring up with that way, and it provides the support that she's requested. The cons, though, are that it might be harder to terminate later, especially if I have to give her tenure instead of probationary, and with that intensive evaluation. And also the cons impact student growth negatively because, again, she has been resistant to feedback so far. Option four is the resignation. The pros are she can get hired elsewhere. I mean, she could still get hired elsewhere anyways, but with the resignation, it looks better and she has better chances. It attempts to repair some damage because there's obviously going to be a conversation involved. And the pros for me is that it still lets a weak teacher go. The negative or the cons are it impacts my relationship with other buildings because she's going to be applying other places, and I might be setting up those principals for a bad situation where they would end up with a teacher that was unsuccessful with their students. And then not providing opportunity for change. Again, not giving her the option to change in the future. So after a lot of pros and cons and weighing everything out, I went with option two, to follow through with non-renewal. And here are the reasons. Reason number one, she had low expectation for her students and our students at the school. And that is tied to reason number two, which is students who are taught by effective teachers gain over a year's worth of growth, while less than half a year's growth with ineffective teachers. And so it was really impacting our students' ability to grow because of her low expectations. Also, for reason number 3, she was hostile to feedback suggestions in the post-conference. So I did try to provide her with ways to grow, and she was not having it. She was not receptive at all. And reason number 4 was that she was also resistant to my attempts to repair some of the damage to our relationship when I tried to have conversations. She, especially in that, I know that that was a difficult time during that conversation, but the last conversation, but even during that time, she came into the room already shut down. And so even those attempts, she was resistant to. So here's my action plan and how I plan to implement it. So first, I'm going to go ahead and submit that non-renewal. I'm going to follow through with my decision. I may offer the resignation option if there's a way that it could be done where some of the damage has been repaired, but I don't know what that would look like going forward, or if that's possible. And I am also concerned about what would happen next for her at a different building. Second, I would need to hire a new teacher. So I need to use my knowledge gained from my experience with Mrs. Stevens to hire a new teacher, being aware of what that hiring process was like before, and maybe noticing some trends and trying to make a better choice this time around. Step number 3 would be for myself, because I did make some mistakes, I think, in this situation. And so I do think I need to attend some professional development for principals on supervision and evaluation, and especially on providing actionable feedback to teachers, especially resistant teachers. Step number 4, the next step would be to examine my resources. So I want to make sure that I find funding and support for mentors and instructional coaches and an instructional coach for the building, because I think that would be really important and was not part of our system already. And also part of that is to evaluate effective evaluation systems, because apparently we don't have one. And so if one is not provided, then I want to make my own effective evaluation system. So obviously that leads to the next step of updating my evaluation system, which includes systematic changes, which are actionable feedback, professional development, mentorship. I'm going to get more to that in a minute. And then the last step is to evaluate the progress. So I'm going to determine if teachers are able to make changes to their instruction through student data, through teacher feedback, through utilizing hopefully the instructional coach and mentors to evaluate that progress. Is it working? What were the changes? Are the changes working? So this is kind of my evaluation system that I'd like to put in place, because there clearly there are aspects missing to our observation system that would have made this situation with Mrs. Stevens go more smoothly. Since she was so resistant, I think she probably would have still ended up being non-renewed. However, this would have given us a little bit more data, and she wouldn't have as much of a foot to stand on. Not that she does, because she's probationary, but it would have just been a little bit better for myself and her, and as well as other teachers. And so that starts with goal setting by every teacher. Every teacher needs to be setting goals for the year. Ongoing classroom observations by myself and any other administrators in the building, using the pause method or some method of that type, which include writing out all observed behaviors, making sure to include at least one positive thing that the teacher did, with actionable feedback that is provided immediately after the observation, something that they can do, 1 or 2 things. Provide opportunities for peer observations, both ways, both for teachers who are struggling or teachers who are doing well, making sure that everyone's getting an opportunity to observe each other. Mentorship provided for all probationary and new teachers to the building, giving everyone an opportunity to make connections, and especially to that school community. That can be a hard transition, so mentors help with that. Professional development that's tied to the evaluations, giving our teachers opportunities to practice and learn more about effective instructional strategies and practices. And then also implementing some student surveys, giving us opportunities to see what our students think, and creating a community that supports the well-being of students and adults. And I think the next steps after implementing all of those would also be to create a rubric for teacher effectiveness that breaks down specific expectations. I know a lot of places have done this, especially in the more recent years where evaluation has really been a focus for a lot of states. They've really been working on this, but for any school districts or states where they're not doing this, I think that would be the next step for me as a principal, would be then to create our own teacher rubric. So then it breaks it already down more than what was provided in the case study. And then also utilizing the instructional coach in this process. Hopefully that would be something that we would be able to provide in the building, and bring that person alongside us as to help teachers be more successful. Because I think as a principal, one of the important parts is, yes, you have one of the important parts of leadership is having expertise, knowledge, practical suggestions, workable ideas, ability to problem solve. All these things make me not just a leader who leads the building, but also respected by the teachers because they're respecting my leadership in instruction. And I think when that's lacking in a building, teachers just lose respect, and it really hurts the community, the school community. So that it would be my plan moving forward. So one of my warnings would be to make sure that when I'm having these conversations, that they are tactful. So whenever possible, making sure those conversations are restorative, trying to build bridges and trying to make sure that any harm that's done is repaired, finding that common ground, that place where we can both agree on something, making sure when I'm sharing things, it's facts-based and not based on my feelings. And then also after these difficult conversations, to self-assess. What went well, what didn't. Obviously, my conversations with Mrs. Stevens did not go well, and there's some work there to be done. For Plan B, I actually had a very hard time deciding between the option I chose and option 3. So option 3 would be to keep Mrs. Stevens and provide support, but with caveats. And it's because I didn't quite know what would be happening at the district, if this would be at this school, if this would even be a possibility. I know in my current district and in previous districts this has been, where you maintain the probationary status by putting her on an improvement plan. But because I couldn't guarantee that, I didn't want to risk that 10-year situation. But it would include goal setting, mentoring, peer observations both ways, both her to observe others and others to observe her, and actionable feedback with follow-up to ensure growth. And that would be happening all year. And that if growth was not achieved, if students were still in the same boat, that she would for sure be non-renewed. But if not, hopefully she would be able to grow and become a better teacher. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.